Okay, so how to work with numbers, basic math review. So this video is really designed to quickly go over a lot of material in a short period of time. And we're going to be reviewing basic math. So that's math that's really taught from the middle school level on down. We're not really going to be talking about algebra concepts or geometry. We're really going to be focusing on arithmetic and some other things, but there is a good amount of material to be covered. And again, this video is designed with kind of a practical application in mind. So, if you just want to, brush up on math skills that you need for your job, or maybe you're in a technical school or you're taking a GED, I think you'll find this very helpful. If you want more like formal instruction on this, I'll leave you a link to my math learning website in the description of this video, so you can go in and really learn this much more in depth. If you have a calculator, that'll be useful if you want to follow along in this video, and I want to encourage you to use a calculator. So let's get going. It's going to, like I said, I'm going to be going pretty quick, but I want to show you what I want to cover here in this video, and then we'll get right into it. So I'm going to first talk about the most common type of numbers that you're going to be really working with in basic math, and then we'll talk about some basic number operations. We'll take a quick look at fractions and decimals, and then we'll look at positive and negative numbers and something called the order of operations, and then we'll take a quick review on percent. All right, so let's get into it. So most common type of numbers that we kind of work with in basic math. So I got some things here that I already kind of pre-wrote, so I'll go ahead and talk about these as we get going. So these numbers here, you're probably familiar with: 0, 1, 2, 3, and then these little dots like this to the right just mean these numbers continue. These are something we call whole numbers, okay? Or you can think of these as naturally occurring numbers, like one house, 2 cars, 3 people, 0, money, whatever the case might be, right? 0 of anything. So these numbers are kind of what we experience in life, okay? So mathematics is really kind of built upon this first type of number system. But these aren't the only type of numbers. So these numbers we're common with, but these numbers here, if we start taking the negative of these numbers, we come up with a whole nother type of concept, okay? We come up with the concept of negative and positive numbers and 0. So technically these numbers here that I listed are called integers, but I want you to think of them as negative and positive numbers, okay? We need to have a firm understanding of those, and we'll get into that in a second. Now the next numbers that I got listed here are decimals, okay? So I'm going to tell you right now, in terms of how we're going to handle decimals in basic math, I want you to use your calculator. Now I'm not going to teach you how to actually add or subtract decimals, because that's not practical, right? We're not going to do, there's no need to do that when you have a calculator. However, our next set of numbers I have listed here, fractions, you do need to kind of know the mechanics of adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing fractions. That is important, okay? So I'll be getting into that a little bit more. Now, other type of numbers that you're going to encounter in basic math are things like this, okay? These are square roots. So just a quick review of square roots. The square root of a number, okay, these are 2 examples, the square root of 7 and the square root of 9. But the square root of a number, it's almost like a question, and it's saying, okay, hey number, and we're talking about the number 9, what number times itself gets back to 9? That number underneath this symbol here, that's the square root symbol. It's also known as a radical symbol, okay? So clearly the answer is 3, right? Because 3 times 3 is 9. So the square root of 9 is 3, right? Square root of 25 is what? 5, okay? So a number, the square root of a number is a number multiplied by itself such that it gets back to that original number. Now on your calculator, you'll have a function like so. So make sure that you locate these particular functions I'm going to be talking about in your calculator. So a square root function is like a real basic function. I'll be on almost all calculators these days. Okay, let's move on. basic number operations. Okay, so number operations are what we can do with numbers. So what can we do with any two numbers? So let's talk about these two numbers, 3 and 5. Okay, so what can I do with 3 and 5? Well, I can do what we call number operations. I can manipulate them, right? I can add them together, I can subtract them, I can multiply, I can divide. And these number operations, we learn these in like elementary school, right? Your times table, addition, etc. Again, I'm not going to be teaching you how to add or subtract, multiply or divide. We're not going to be reviewing times tables, etc. These are things that you should know. So you want to go ahead and brush up on that independently. But even if you had a calculator and you didn't know, but you had a calculator and you kind of understood what I would talk about in this video, you can manage these problems. And I would encourage you to use a calculator. Don't do too much what we call mental math, trying to think and say, oh, I don't need a calculator. Don't feel like that's cheating. Use the calculator because that's going to be like an insurance policy that you're doing things correctly. Now, something as simple as 3 plus 5, you should, just know that. So real basic numbers, yes, it's fine. But as the numbers get a little more bigger and more complicated, just switch over to your calculator. Okay, so the next thing in terms of number operations is powers. So I'll talk about that. So this is a good example, 5 squared. Okay, this is what we call power. Now this is, there's technical terminology for this. This part down here is called the base, it's called the exponent. We don't need to know that. You just need to recognize this as a power. And what it's saying is, take this bigger number, the one down to the far left. You see how we write it purposely bigger than this small little number. That's done on purpose. It says whatever that big number is, it's 5. Multiply it by itself this many times. Okay, so all right, so 5, that's 2. So 5 times 5, that's 2 times. So my answer is 25. So 5 squared is 25. Likewise, if I have 5 cubed, 5 to the 3rd power, take 5, right, and multiply it by itself how many times? 3. So I'm going to go like this. 5 times 5 times 5, I got to do that math, and that turns out to be 125. Okay, so that's how powers work. Now, in your calculator, you'll have 1 to 3 keys. Generally speaking, you'll have a key that looks like this. All right, so that's a power key. So you'll go 5, you'll hit this little button here, then you'll put the 3 in. If you hit enter, you'll get 125. Now if you don't have that key, you may have a key that looks like this. An X to a little Y. It's a very common key. And probably the most common key is what we call a caret. It's an upside down V. It looks like this. So if you put 5, 3, 5, 3 in any of these examples and you get 125, you'll know that you have the right key. So just like with the square root, make sure you identify on your calculator which key you're using, okay, for this particular functions, because in basic math there's a lot of powers. Okay, the last thing here I want to talk about in number operations is absolute value. You might encounter this. Again, I don't want to go on to all the technical things about it, but basically you need to know that the absolute value of a number, okay, and the way we know it, we're asking about absolute value is these 2 bars. They're kind of like, they're longer than like 1. You'll notice them. They're like 2 bars that go around a number like so. And whatever that number is, the absolute value of that number is just a number. Okay, so the absolute value of 3 is 3. The absolute value of a negative number is its positive version. So the absolute value of a negative 3 is 3. Again, I'm not going to get into what absolute value is. Well, I'll get into it just a little bit. All absolute value is a distance and number is from 0. So, for example, 3 is 3 units away from 0. And negative 3 happens to be 3 units away from 0. That's all absolute value is. But I just want you to remember that the absolute value of a number is going to be the positive version of itself. This is a number operation you might very well encounter. Okay. Now, in your calculator, you'll probably find a button like that. Well, maybe not directly an absolute value button, but on a more advanced scientific calculator, this function is there, but you don't need to know that. Okay, you just need to know that the absolute value of a number is just its positive version. Okay. All right, let's take a look at fractions and decimals, and I'll try to make this as painless as possible. So here I got some fractions written. Okay, so again, almost all of you have seen fractions. So here we have 1/3, 4/3, and 3 1/2. So these are 3 different type of fractions. This is a proper fraction, improper fraction, and a mixed number. Not really important that you understand the terminology. You should know it, but just, you know, it's more important that you understand the parts here. So the parts of a fraction, the top number is called the numerator, and the bottom number is called the denominator. And those two pieces here make up the components of a fraction. Okay. Now fractions have decimal equivalents. Okay. I could take 1 here, 1/3, that's the way I would say this, or 1/3. What this really means is 1 divided by 3. Okay, this little line is the division line. That's 1 divided by 3. Now we don't say 4 divided by 3. We would say 4/3 or 4/3. Okay, or this would be 1/3 or 1/3. Okay, but it technically means 1 divided by 3. So 1 divided by 3, if I go into my calculator, I'm going to get 0.3. I'll actually get a bunch of 0.3s. But 1/3, that fraction has a decimal equivalent of 0.3. So that's the important thing you need to know. So all fractions, like so, okay, like with whole numbers and integers, have a decimal equivalent. So we can take a fraction and turn it into a decimal. Now, almost all decimals can go back to fractions. There are certain type of decimals that you can't convert back to fractions, but this is really not going to be let's see here, done too much in basic math. I'll show you a couple examples here, right? So if I had the decimal 0.5, what do you think that is as a fraction? Well, let's just say that decimal 0.5 or 5/10, right? This is the if we say this 5/10, this means 5/10, right? I'm kind of actually saying that 5/10. So 5/10, if I reduce that, is the fraction 1/2. Okay, so you should have a good feel of being able to express a decimal as a fraction. But again, you're going to be doing this in more basic terms. Now, you're not going to be doing too much of this in, say, in practical applications, you know, converting a decimal into a fraction. But you likely are going to be doing much more of converting a fraction into a decimal. And to do that, all you need to do is take that numerator and divide it by the denominator. So here, 4/3, if I take 4 and I divide it by 3, I'll get my calculator. I know the answer, but just to double check myself, 4/3 on my calculator is obviously going to be 1.333333. This goes on and on and on. This means the 3's continue forever. One way we write that in math is 1.3 with a little bar over it. Okay, so this fraction is equivalent to this decimal. Okay, and of course we can take a decimal and write its fraction equivalent for more basic decimals. But this right here can get a little bit dicey. But let me get back to working with these other type of fractions. So this guy here, this is a mixed number. Okay, so we don't clearly see the numerator and denominator here. But I can write this in such a way where I can see a numerator and denominator. So to take a mixed number, we want to write it as an improper fraction, something like this. So I'm just curious if you remember how to do it. I'll give you a quick moment to figure it out if you want to try. Okay, so all we do is, remember, we take this little 2 in here. We take this number, we multiply it by this number. So 3 times 2 is 6. And then we're going to add it to whatever number is this. So this is going to be 2 times 3. That's 6 plus 1 is 7. We write that here. And then we write that little 2 down here. Okay, and that's it. So now I have 3 1/2 as a mixed number, but it's equivalent to this improper fraction, 7/2. Let's do another one. Let's do 5 2/3. Okay, you want to go ahead and try that? right, so it'll be 3 times 5 is 15, plus 2 is 17 thirds. Okay, so again, if I wanted to take this and write it as a mixed number, I could. I would just go 2 divided by 7. I would do this whole math and get my remainder as such, but don't do that. I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of students feel like they have to take improper fractions and write them as mixed numbers. I would not encourage you not to do that, okay, unless there's a specific reason, like if you're using a tape measure and you need to kind of really do that, then you can do this. But also, you could take 7 divided by 2 and turn this into a decimal equivalent, right? So 7 halves, if you wanted to look at it as a decimal, is just 7 divided by 2, which of course is just going to be 3.5, right? Okay, so again, all these fractions have decimal equivalents. These decimals can also be written as fractions, not all decimals, but many of the basic decimals that you may be encountering in basic math. All right, so before I move into my next little review here about fractions, let's talk about decimals. Okay, so we're going to talk about number operations. Okay, adding, subtracting, multiply, and dividing. All right, so how do we work with decimals? I'm just going to tell you right now, use your calculator. Okay, I'm not going to tell you this is how you add decimals, divide, because it's impractical at this point. You should know how to do it. Okay, you should know how to do it, but it's not necessary for you to manage, and solve a problem in basic math. Just use your calculator. However, fractions, different story, okay? And you're going to need to know fractions if you want to even move beyond basic math into algebra. So I'm going to do a quick review of some fraction operations. Again, when we're talking about fraction operations, we're talking about how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. These are the number operations, right? With the different type of numbers that we're looking at. So I like to break up or think of fractions in two parts, okay? Stuff that's really super easy, and then stuff that's just, takes a little bit more work. I hate to use the word difficult or harder because it's really not that difficult or hard. But let's just think of fractions in these two categories, super easy and stuff that takes a little bit longer. Okay, what's easy in terms of fractions? Well, multiplication and division, really easy to do, okay? Okay, so I got some example problems here, and we'll start with this first one here, 1/2 times 3/5. To multiply fractions, it's super easy. All we do is we multiply across. The numerators times the numerators, the denominators times the denominators. That's it. So in this case, 1/2 times 3/5 is going to be equal to what? 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 5 is 10. I'm done. And really, it's not any more difficult than that. Now, if you have a mixed number here, you'll have to change that into an improper fraction like we just talked about over here. Okay, so if you have that scenario, make sure you turn all your fractions into improper fractions. Okay, and then just go ahead and follow that. So, like again, multiplication of fractions, very easy. Now let's talk about division. We don't really do division of fractions. What we do is we take a division problem and we change it into a multiplication problem. And because we already know how to do multiplication, this is going to be easy. So how do we do that? So the way we do it is the following. So we keep the first fraction the same. So in this case, it's 1/2. So I'm going to write this as 1/2. And then I'm going to take the division symbol here, and I'm going to write it as multiplication. You're saying, well, how can you change a division into multiplication? Well, I can do that by taking the following step. I take the last fraction, the fraction to the right. Okay, very specifically. It's not either or. Very specifically, it has to be one to the right. And I flip it upside down. That's called the reciprocal. So when I flip that, I get 5/3. Okay? And what do I have now? I have a multiplication problem. So I just took this division problem and turned it into its equivalent problem, but just in terms of multiplication. And now what do? I just multiply across. 1 times 5 is 5. 2 times 3 is 6. I'm done. So there you go. So out of the 4 number operations, we've already knocked out 2. All right, we're going quick. Okay, now let's move on to stuff that's a little bit more challenging, but really it's not even that bad as well. Okay, and that's addition and subtraction. So I got two addition problems here because adding and subtracting fractions is the same step. So we'll just focus on addition right now. So adding fractions is super easy as well. This is very easy, okay? To add two fractions together, you can do so if the denominators, these bottom numbers, are the same, okay? So when I look here, I'm saying, okay, are these the same? Yes, I got 7 and 7. They are the same, so I can add these. Now, the way I add them is the following, okay? I'm going to write my answer fraction right here. I'm going to keep the same number, okay? So in this case, it's 7, right? The same denominator. And all I'm going to do is add the numerators. I'm going to add these guys together. All right, so that's 1 plus 3 is 4. I'm done. Super easy. And it works the same way with subtraction. So already out of the three things here in terms of fractions, okay, division, multiplication, and a part of addition and subtraction, very easy. Okay, so what gets students in trouble? Okay, most students are people are like, oh, I hate fractions because of the following. Because they'll face a fraction when they want to add it that has different denominators, different bottom numbers, and they like panic. Oh, what do I do? Okay, this is not that difficult. So let's talk about this. And again, I'll leave a description or link to my learning website in the description of this video, and you can learn about this in more detail. But I'm going to quickly go through it as a review. So I cannot add these two fractions because these bottom numbers are the same. So I have to rewrite these fractions in such a way that they get the same bottom number, but these numbers need to have a number that's in common. So let me show you what I mean. So let's talk about numbers that are in common with 3. These would be the multiples of 3, like 3 times 1, 3 times 2, okay? 3 times 3. So 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, and we'll just keep going, right? All these right here, these are multiples of 3. Let's do the same thing with 5. So 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, 5 times 4 is 20, on and on and on, okay? Well, what we're looking to do is find, okay, these are multiples of 3 and these are multiples of 5. We're looking to find a number that's in common with both of these lists. Can you see that number? It's 15, right? So this is what we call a common multiple. Like these are multiples, right, of 5. This is multiples of 3. Hey, these are common multiples between 3 and 5. So we want to pick the lowest one. So in this case, it's 15, all right? So we need to rewrite these fractions such that they have 15 as their denominator because it's the same number, okay? It's the same number. And then, of course, I can do what I did up here and just add them. So how do I do that? Well, how can I make a 3 into a 15? How about just multiplying by 5? Well, if I do that, I multiply the top by 5 as well. So this becomes 5/15. All right? Same thing here. How do I turn a 5 into a 15? Multiply it by 3. But if I multiply the bottom by 3, I got to multiply the top by 3. So this fraction becomes 6/15, and now I can just add like I did up here. Same denominators, just add the numerators, 11/15, and I'm done. So this is the same procedure I would use with subtracting fractions as well. There is more to this because the numbers can get more complicated, but this, if you understand what I just went over now, you understand a big part of fractions, okay? And it's important that you do understand how to work with fractions and etc. But again, we're not going to be able to cover everything in this video. This just meant as a good power review to kind of brush up your cobwebs. All right, so let's move on, and we'll talk about positive and negative numbers. Now, I have a list of negative and positive numbers here, but let's just talk about what this means. You're like, well, is this basic math? Yeah, no, it's stuff that we encounter. So let's say you check your bank account and you have this much money in it, okay? And then tomorrow you go check your bank account and you have this much money in it. So what happened? Okay, here you have money. This is a positive value. And here you have no money. You have actually less money than it's, you have less than no money. What does this mean? If you have this much money, this means you owe $500. This is negative money. In other words, you have to pay. If I was broke, I had no money and no bills, that'd be okay. But what if I'm broke, I have no money, and then I get a bill for $500? I actually, I'd rather just have no money, right? So this is less than zero. So remember, numbers in this direction are less than zero, and numbers in this direction to the right of zero increase. This is positive and this is negative. So numbers that go in this direction here become smaller and smaller and smaller, and these numbers become bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, so positive and negative numbers, extremely important concepts to understand. So just like fractions is, we're going to be talking about number operations. I like to break this up in two parts. Okay, there's the easy stuff, and then there's stuff that's a little bit harder. I'll do some example problems here, and we'll kind of go from it, take it from there. So the easy stuff, all right. So if the signs are the same, the answer is positive. Then we're talking about multiplication and division. If the signs are different or negative. So let me give you an example. What are the signs of a number? The signs of a number is the thing that's in front of a number. So this is a -3, and this is a +3. I don't write a +3 like this. We don't do that. So if we don't have a negative in front of it, it's already, the sign is positive. We just don't write the little positive like that, okay? So a -3 times a -2, I'm going to multiply, and I'm saying, oh, these signs are the same. They're both negative. My answer is a +6. Okay, of course, I would just write it as 6. So what if I have different signs? What if I have a -3 times a +2? Well, it's still 6, but the signs are different, so my answer is negative. It's no more difficult than that. Now, same thing for division. Let's go ahead and write this. -10 divided by -2. Signs are the same. Answer is +5. I have -2 divided by a +2. Signs are different, so my answer is a -5. So if you can remember these rules, you're going to be well on your way. Now, I want to tell you that on your calculator, you should have a button that looks something like this. It's usually in the lower part of your calculator, one of the buttons down near the bottom. That's the negative number. So if you hit this number and hit 3 or 10, you should be able to create negative values, and you can practice these rules. So if you didn't know what -10 times +4 was, you can use this little button here to create to write these numbers as negative values in your calculator. So look for that button. That's an important function. It's not the subtraction key. Okay, the subtraction operator in your calculator is different than the negative button. Okay, so very specifically, it should look like this on most calculators. All right, so now let's move on to what's a little bit harder, and that's addition and subtraction. The best way I like to think of this is working with money. Okay, so I'm going to take these 4 examples here to kind of illustrate how this works. All right, so the rule is if you have positive values, like say 3, that's like you have money. Okay, and negative values, all right, so something like this is like debt. All right, like a bill, like you owe somebody. So we just do these little quick storyline kind of scenarios, all right? So you'll follow me when I go through this. So this first problem here, let's say you have $3 in your pocket, okay? But now you owe somebody, you find out that somebody comes up to you and says, hey, listen, remember that $5 that you owe me? Now you owe somebody $5, okay? So you have $3 in your pocket, that's all you have, and now we find out you owe somebody $5. So what happens? Well, you give that person your $3, right? And you're left with just $2 in debt. So 3 plus -5 is -2. Okay? So think of it in this way. There's actual specific rules here, but I want you to kind of always keep this money model in mind. I think it will really kind of help you, all right? So if you have money and your debt's greater than the money you have, you still have debt left over, right? So what do you think this next one means? Okay, this means you owe somebody $3, and then somebody else walks up to you and say, hey, you owe me $5 as well. So now you have a total of what? You have a total of $8 in debt. Okay, so -3 plus -5 is a -8. All right, so this is addition. If you know how to add positive, negative numbers, then you'll know how to subtract. So the way subtraction works is we take a subtraction problem, we turn it into a addition problem. The way we do that is this. So you see my little subtraction sign here? I'm going to turn it into addition, but I got to do a little trick here, okay? So I'm going to write this as a plus, and when I do that, I got to put the minus, the negative sign, to the number to the right. I'll do that again, okay? So 3 minus 5, I'm going to change this into addition problem because I already know how to add over here, right? So I want to look at this as an addition problem. So 3 minus 5, I'll say, okay, I want to see this as addition, so I'm going to turn it into addition and put the negative sign here. Now I can use my little money model to figure this out. I have $3, but I just got a $5 bill. So we're right back to this scenario, my first example problem, that's -2. All right, so 3 minus 5 is -2. All right, let's take a look at this last problem. And this is a negative of a negative, all right? The negative sign is also, we kind of think of it as opposite sign. So what's the opposite of a -3? Opposite of a -3 is a positive, or sorry, +3. So the opposite of a negative number is always positive. So we have a negative of a negative, it's positive. So just write that as a positive number. So negative of -3, or the opposite of -3 is 3. Plus 5, of course, is just equal to 8. Okay, so we're trucking along here pretty good. We're covering a lot of ground pretty quick. But if you're able to, absorb a lot of what I'm saying here and understand these principles, well, I'm telling you, you're going to be, setting yourself up for a pretty good little foundation for basic math. Okay, again, use your calculator. Know that, use that little function on your calculator, the little negative sign, and practice this stuff. But you can see that this is not overly complex. Okay, it becomes overly complex because we try to do word problems right off the bat and it's not. Just learn how to manipulate numbers and you'll be okay. All right, so let's move forward to the order of operations. We're getting there. We're almost finishing up, and let's talk about this. Okay, order of operations. Now, remember we talked about what operations are. Those are addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, powers, all that kind of good stuff. Well, we just don't get to randomly just do a problem like this and and just kind of like, oh, maybe I'll do this first, or no, maybe I'll handle this problem by saying 4 divided by 2 is 2, and then I'll next subtract the 2 from 10, that's 8. Nah, I don't want to start the problem that way. Maybe I want to go 10 minus 4 is 6 divided by 2. See, if you weren't given any rules to do this problem, people could do this in all kinds of different ways. And they'd be creative. And a lot of people do, and that's wrong, okay? There's actually a very specific order in order to do a problem like this, okay? And we're going to need to know this little phrase here to remind us what order we do this problem in, okay? This is called PEMDAS, all right? It's really just a little mnemonic reminder to describe the order of operations. The P is we're going to do parentheses first. Anything that's in parentheses we're going to do first. You can see here we have some parentheses in this problem. The E is powers. Okay, you're like, well, why didn't I just put another P? Well, that would be confusing, but the E stands for exponent. It just means do any powers next. Okay, the M and D we couple together, and that's multiplication and division. We do which one we see first from left to right. From left to right. And then A and S is addition and subtraction, and we do which one we see first from left to right. So in other words, it doesn't have to be multiplication to division. If I have division to the left and then multiplication, I do it that way. Same thing with subtraction and addition. A lot of students get stuck and they're like, oh, I have to do multiplication before I do division. No, you do which one out of multiplication, division, whatever you see coming from left to right. Okay, so just a quick review of PEMDAS, and with that in mind, let's go and do this problem. So we start with our P. Do we have, it's like a checklist, do we have any parentheses? Yes, we do. They're right here. Okay, so what do? I have to do what's inside the parentheses until I move to the next step. So what's inside the parentheses is 3 squared plus 1. So I kind of go back to my checklist, and say, what do I do, in here? So you're using this PEMDAS all the time. So here I have powers. Okay, I don't have any more parentheses, but I have a power, so I'm going to do that. And when I'm doing this, I'm going to kind of rewrite the problem. Okay, so 3 squared is 9, right? That's 3 times 2. So that's 9 plus 1. But I'm not done yet inside the parentheses. So the only thing left for me to do is add, and then I'll be done with everything, all my work inside the parentheses. So let's go and do that again. To 10 minus 4 divided by 2 times 10. Okay, now I'm done with the parentheses and I'm done with powers. Okay, all that's left for me to do is multiplication and division. So I start looking at this problem from left to right. Okay, so you can see here I have 10 minus 4, but I'm not going to do that first. Okay, I keep going from left to right because I have division and multiplication, which is higher in my pecking order here than addition and subtraction. So the first one I see from left to right is division. Okay, so I got to do that. So this is going to be what? 4 divided by 2 is 2. So I'm going to write this as 10 minus 2 times 10. Okay, now because there's nothing more to do here in these parentheses, I can just drop them. Okay, so again, looking from left to right, I see that I have multiplication, which kind of outranks subtraction. So I'm going to do this here. So 2 times 10 is 20. So I have 10 minus 20, and I'm almost done. Okay, and this is why we needed to know the rules of positive and negative numbers. So if you just, recall from what we just learned, this is going to be what? I'm going to have to change the subtraction to a addition and carry that negative sign over, right? So 10 plus a negative 20. If I have $10, but I just got a bill for $20, I have negative $10 in debt. Okay. Again, you can use your calculator here. Now, if you're very careful, you can actually plug this whole thing into your calculator and get your answer, but you need to really know how to manage this process, and you should write it very neatly and step by step, just like I did here. Okay, very, very, very important. Order of operations is one of the main areas students mess up, because this is really kind of a classic, basic kind of math problem, right? Like, you're dealing with a lot of numbers. You got to be able to work with them. That's what the video is about. Order of operations is key, but we also need to know about positive, negative numbers, and these numbers I can throw in some decimals and fractions as well. You see, so it's not going to always just be super easy numbers like so. But so if you can manage all this and keep it together, you're going to be, really good at this. Okay, let's finish this up real quick. I want to talk about percent, because I think this is a key area that everybody, all adults, people should know about. Percent, just basic stuff. I'm not even going to get into a really advanced percent problems. Okay. All right. So 7% of 980. Did you do that problem? 7% of 908. Okay. All you need to do is change the percent to a decimal. That's 0.07, and we're going to multiply it by the number 908. That's it. Okay. When we do that, we'll get our answer. So if you kind of remember that, then you're good to go. You need to be able to find the percent of a number. So how did I know that 7% is 0.07? There's two ways you can do it. Okay. You can take this number 7, okay, with the percent symbol behind it, and divide it by 100. Okay, you'll get 0.07. Now, another way you can think of that, this 7%, is if I was to write 7 with a decimal in it, it's technically 7.0, right? 7.0 is the same thing as 7. So all you do to change a percent to its decimal equivalent is move the decimal point over 2 places to the left, so that you get your 0.07 there. Okay, so if you remember how to do that, Got that, then you'll be good to go. So to finding percent of a number, you should know how to do that. You need to know how to change a percent into its decimal equivalent. I gave you 2 ways of doing that. Okay? And then once I've done that, then I just go ahead and multiply by the number and I'll get the answer. So let's just go and finish this problem. Get my calculator. Let's see here. 0.07 times 908. 908 is 63.56. 63.56. I'm going to use that here in a second to illustrate the concept of percent. So you might be looking at this crazy box that I wrote here and be like, oh, what is this? What is this down here? Well, another way we might see percent problem is you might be asked to find the percent of a part out of a whole. And that really is kind of the definition of percent. Let's suppose this is a classroom, okay? And let's say this is this spot here is girl, this is a girl, this is a girl, and everybody else here is, let's say, boys, okay? And I wanted to know the percent of girls in the class. Okay, so how would I do that? Well, you want to figure out the part out of the whole. That's the whole idea behind percent. So the part is how many? There's three girls here, okay, in my class, but how many do I have total? So I have 1, 2, 3 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 18 total people in the class, 3 of which, okay, that part of the entire whole is are girls, okay? So how do I determine what the percent is? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 and divide it by 18. Okay, so of course, we know this is the fraction 1/6, but we'll take 3 divided by 18, and you get the decimal 0.1666. It just keeps going on continuously. So we're not done yet. So now I have a decimal here, okay, and if I want to convert a decimal to a percent, all I do is move the decimal point over 2 places to the right. Okay, it's the same thing as multiplying by 100. So I'm going to take this decimal, 0.1666666, and I can do it one or two ways. Okay, I can multiply by 100. Okay, or I can just simply move the decimal point. I'll show you down here, 0.1666666 over 2 places to the right, 1, 2, so that's 16.6%. Okay, I'll just round off the rest, and this will be the same thing, 16.6%. So this is how you find the part out of the whole. Now, let's go back to our original problem. If I said 63.56 is what percent of 908? So this is the part and this is the whole. So I would just go, okay, 63.56, that's the part. I'm going to divide it by the whole, 908. Let's just go ahead and do this. So that we'll have 63.56 divided by 908, and that's going to be what? 0.07. I have my decimal, but I'm not done yet. That's not the percentage. I just have this fraction represented as a decimal. To get to the percent, I got to multiply by 100 or move the decimal point 2 places over to the right. That's 7%. And of course we knew that because that was the original problem. Okay, this was a lot to cover in a short period of time, but we just covered about, oh, I don't know, let me see here, 6, 7, maybe 8 years worth of math at whatever length of time this video turned out to be. I think this should be pretty valuable for you. I know, it's not the shortest video, but listen, you're not going to review basic math in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. It's going to take some time. So this right here, if you were able to master all these concepts in terms of your basic fundamental math review or things that you're going forward, this is really solid stuff. Okay, and then you can kind of make sure you got this down before you move on to other areas. These are real core critical skills. Again, if you're interested in learning more, I'll leave a link to my math learning website where I actually offer much more formal video instruction, tons of more example problems. And of course, on my YouTube channel, I have a ton of other stuff as well. So if you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And thanks for watching. I wish you the best of luck.